Hello. So, in today's lesson, we are looking at what was the Tehran Conference. We've got two learning objectives to understand why the Grand Alliance met up in 1943 and to understand what they agreed upon at this conference and also why there might still have been tension there. So, you'll have a quiz to complete at the end of the lesson. It's in Google Classroom. Any questions you might have, please feel free to contact me, gbrown@stopsleyhighschool.co.uk. So, in 1943, Russia met with Great Britain and the USA, and they formed an alliance called the Grand Alliance. Now, just have a quick think, why might this be strange that Russia was allying with the West? Well, hopefully you've been able to use some of your history knowledge here that we built up with the Russia unit. First of all, if you remember, there were tense relationships between the East and the West from 1918 to 1941, and there were a few reasons behind that. So, first of all, Britain and the USA had been scared for a long time of communism spreading. Now, you can see this early on when they supported the Whites against the Communist Reds during the Russian Civil War in the years 1918 to 1921. Stalin was also scared of an invasion, but by the West. So Stalin, since he'd been leader of Russia in 1928, had pushed for industrialization. He wanted a modern army. He had said that the West were 100 years ahead of Russia, and they had to close that gap in 10 years or they would be invaded. He was very scared about the West attacking. And also, more recently, in 1939, Stalin and Hitler had signed an unlikely alliance. It was called the Nazi-Soviet Pact. So it seems very strange in 1943 that America, Britain, and Russia would be working together based on this information. So why was that the case? Well, in June 1941, Hitler betrayed Stalin, and Nazi Germany invaded Russia. Now, this meant that Hitler was now an enemy of the USA, the USSR, and Britain. There was common ground between the three, and these three countries might not have liked each other, but they had to work together to defeat him. They had to work together for this end goal. It's a little bit like when a teacher puts you into groups that you don't like the people you're in the group with, but you've got to work together to complete the project. Very much a similar thing here. They don't trust each other, but their hatred and fear of Hitler is even greater than their hatred and distrust of each other. So they met up at a conference. A conference is basically a meeting. And this happened in Tehran in around 1943. You've got Stalin is scared of flying, and so it's a bit closer towards Russia. And this was attended by Roosevelt of the USA, Churchill of Great Britain, and Stalin of the USSR. And they wanted to improve relations by meeting up and to plan how to attack and defeat Hitler. So what did they agree at this conference? Well, Britain and USA would support Russia in fighting the Nazis. At this time, the USSR was the only country actively fighting Germany. And you can see that there on this map. You can see where you've got that borderline between the black and the red. That's roughly where they were fighting at this time. Hundreds of Russians were dying each day in the east. So, Britain and the USA said, we will help you, Russia. We will also fight. We will land our troops in Nazi-occupied France. Now, this would create a second place of fighting now in the West, a second front. So the top map shows where they were going to land in France on the beaches, and that bottom map shows what the aim was, that they would be able to attack Germany from both sides and push them back to Germany and free up the countries that Nazi Germany had invaded. This would mean that the USSR or Russia had support. Germany would be easier to defeat in theory. They were now being attacked from both sides. Some of those Germans that were fighting the Russians would now have to move over to the West to fight the British and the Americans. It would take the pressure off the Russians. They weren't fighting Germany alone. So, what else was agreed? The Soviet Union said, we will fight Japan after Germany was defeated. If you remember with the attack on Pearl Harbor pictured here, this is what had brought America in the war in the first place, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. They were now enemies fighting each other, And Russia said, any enemy of yours, America, is now an enemy of ours. We will support you in destroying Japan and forcing them to surrender. And they also said, we need a system for when we end the war. We need to come up with a way of keeping the peace. And the League of Nations, which was used, which wasn't particularly effective, was going to be replaced with a new organization to keep peace in the world. This would be called the United Nations. So, lots of agreements we can see at the Tehran conference. The different countries were moving forward. But there were some disagreements as well. Let's have a look at these and try to understand why. Well, first of all, Stalin wanted the USA and Britain to create this second front to land in France much quicker than they did. Stalin said, well, this is brilliant. I'm losing hundreds of Russians every day. Please, I need you guys to land. Can you do it in the next few weeks, next few months? And essentially, Britain and America said, it's going to take about a year for us to do. To plan this out, we'll get one chance at this. Now, from the American and the British point of view, they argued it would take a long time. The troops would need to be trained. They would need to send misleading information to the Germans. They weren't suspecting an attack. They only got one go at this. They had to get it right. From Stalin's point of view, however, he saw this as an attack. He said, actually, well, I know how this is. You hate the communists and you hate the Nazis. You people in the West, you must be loving the fact that we are fighting each other at the moment. Your two enemies wiping each other out. He felt the attack was delayed on purpose, that the Soviet Union could be seriously damaged by German invaders. Stalin also felt it was essential that he controlled Poland to protect his country from future attacks. Stalin argued that Russia had been attacked and invaded in World War I and World War II, and both times opposing countries had marched through Poland, as shown there in the sort of pinky colour on the map, pinky orange, to get through to Russia. He said, I must control Poland, I must put a strong Russian army in Poland to protect the Soviet Union. Churchill said, no, after the war, Poland needs to be independent. Poland needs to be free. I mean, this was why Britain had gone to war in the first place in 1939, when the Nazis invaded Poland. Britain had gone to war to protect, liberate and free Poland so it could be independent, not so that Stalin could take over it. Okay, so that is the first of the three conferences, the Tehran conference there. Now, like I said, you'll have a quiz to complete in Google Classrooms based on this information. Read the questions carefully because you only get one go. And any questions you might have, feel free to contact me, gbrown@stopseyhighschool.co.uk. All that remains for me to say, thank you very much for completing this lesson. Please look after yourselves, go and get some fresh air and exercise where you can. Take care and I will see you soon. All the best. Bye-bye.